I broke it. Maybe it just needs to be turned on before it'll open, Isaac said, and finally, one of them was thinking clearly. Oscar and the boys parted the fur on the back of the rabbit, searching for a switch to indicate it was off. All they found was a line of Velcro closed over a battery compartment, complete with a rectangular 9-volt battery tucked into its place. Below the battery compartment was a pattern of small holes. "Is that a speaker?" asked Isaac. "Hang on, it talks?" "Nah," Raj dismissed. "Not in any of the ads." His brow crinkled. "What does a rabbit even sound like?" "Gentlemen, focus! We're looking for the power switch. Check its feet," Oscar said. And sure enough, when they turned it over, a little black switch pointed to the on position. "Okay," Isaac said, and he reached for the switch, flicking it off, then on, then off again. "Maybe it needs another battery," Raj said, and that sounded like as good a reason as any. Oscar returned to the kitchen and rummaged through the junk drawer, sifting past rubber bands and orange juice coupons until he came upon an open package of 9-volt batteries with one left in the box. "Try this one," Oscar said, hustling back to the living room. The boys plucked the existing battery from its place, scraping away the little bit of white crust that had corroded the inside. They placed the new battery in the compartment and closed the cover. Raj slapped his hands together and rubbed. "This is it!" Oscar picked the rabbit up and flipped the switch on, but the plush trap remained dormant, its mouth locked in a mostly closed position. "Oh, come on!" Isaac complained, the stress of the day clearly beginning to have an effect. Hang on," Oscar said, doing his best to calm the room. He was turning the box over and over in his hands, and there, in bold letters, inside a comic book-style power burst, was a critical detail. "Walks in the dark, freezes in the light. Guys, it only works when the lights are off," Oscar said, and his heart filled with the tiniest bit of hope that all wasn't lost. "Oh," Raj and Isaac said in unison, as though it made perfect sense. Of course, somehow they'd all managed to forget this one crucial detail. The boys got right to work, pulling drapes shut and flicking lights off, surrounding the bunny in as much darkness as possible. But enough daylight still leaked through the curtains to illuminate the disappointment on their faces. The plush-trapped chaser would chase nothing. "It's just not dark enough yet," Isaac said. "It probably has to charge or something," Raj offered. But when neither Isaac nor Raj lobbied to take the plush trap home for the night, the last of Oscar's hope evaporated, leaving his insides feeling dry and cracked. It was just like everything else. He'd had the nerve to think something good might come his way. He'd even done the one thing he swore to himself and to his mom and to anyone whose opinion ever mattered to him that he'd never do. He'd stolen. All for the tiny drop of what could have been a taste, just a taste, of good fortune. Now he was left without 1/3 of $79.99, without one plush-trapped chaser, and maybe even on the verge of losing the 2 friends who'd stuck their necks out for him when his thirst had become too great. Oscar's mom called that night. "Anything exciting happened today?" she asked, the same question she always asked when she was at work and he was at home, feeding himself dinner and putting himself to bed while she worked the night shift and took care of the old people. "Nothing at all," he said, just like he always did. Only this time, it had so much more to say it because something exciting had happened. And then it hadn't. Oscar woke to the smell of coffee like he did most mornings. His mom practically lived on this stuff. How she got home at 3 in the morning and woke up at 7, Oscar had never been able to figure out. When he rolled out of bed, he was momentarily startled. When he rolled out of bed, He was momentarily startled by the gooey-looking eyes swimming in the gaping hollows of a green furry face. They really did look human. "Whoa, hey there, creeper," he said to the plush trap. The rabbit stood at attention by his bedside, right where he left it last night. The tiny shard of a butter knife tip still stuck between two of the visible incisors. But just like yesterday, it did absolutely nothing. Not that it should, given the daylight streaming in through the thin curtains behind Oscar's bed. It was possible he'd gone to bed with the hope that a night in his dark room would charge whatever power source hadn't been triggered by the boys the day before. It was just another stupid hope, though. Oscar shuffled down the hall in his flannel pants and kissed his mom on the cheek like he always did. If Raj or Isaac ever saw him do that, they'd never let him forget it. But Oscar knew what it meant to his mom, and he didn't mind it so much. After his dad died, Oscar took up the habit without his mom ever asking. When he was too short to reach her head, he'd kissed her elbow, then her shoulder. It was just a peck, hardly even a kiss, given that Oscar tucked his lips into his mouth. But disappointing his mom wasn't really an option. After Oscar poured himself a glass of juice and a bowl of sugar flakes, he munched away as usual until he finally looked up and noticed his mom hadn't said a word to him. She was looking down at the newspaper they still had delivered every morning because, as she put it, a subscription was cheaper than a smartphone plan. She hadn't looked up even for a second. His stomach instinctively dropped. "What's up?" he asked, his voice pitched a little higher than usual. His mom slapped her coffee slowly before pulling her mug away from her mouth, her head still down. "Seems there was some sort of accident at the mall yesterday afternoon." Oscar didn't think it was possible for his stomach to sink any lower, but it found a new depth in a hurry. "Oh yeah?" he said, shoving a mound of sugar flakes into his mouth and doing his best not to throw it right back up. "Mm-hmm," his mom said. "Says here the Emporium had to call security and everything," she said, taking another sip of coffee. "Oh wow," Oscar said, spooning more sugar flakes into his mouth, even though he wasn't finished chewing the first spoonful. "All over some stupid toy. Apparently, a couple of kids even made off with one during the commotion." Then Oscar's mom did look up, fixing her dark brown eyes on Oscar's. People were always telling him how much they looked alike, with their smooth features and eyes like coal. "Can you believe that?" she asked, and Oscar understood that she was asking exactly that, if he could believe it. Because if he knew anything about it, anything at all, it wouldn't be so hard to believe it was true. "Irvine mentioned something about you boys heading to the mall yesterday," she said, giving Oscar so many chances not to lie. She'd opened every single door to the truth, inviting Oscar to walk through to be honest. She was begging him not to disappoint her. But it wasn't just Oscar's lie to protect anymore. Oscar had made sure of that when he dragged Raj and Isaac along with him. So, Oscar made a decision. He disappointed his mom to save his friends. "Must have been after we got there," Oscar said. Then he shrugged. A period on the end of the lie. Oscar's mom stared at him for so long he thought maybe he could apologize without saying a word. He hoped his mom could hear it. Instead, she finally released his gaze and drained the last drop of coffee from her mug, folded the paper over itself, and threw it into the recycling bin without another word. Oscar had never felt smaller. He spent the rest of the day at home, avoiding Raj's calls and pretending he didn't hear Isaac knocking at his door. He lay in bed instead, staring at the bulging eyes of the plush trap while it stared back at him. "You're worse than useless," he said to it. Or maybe he said it to himself. The next few days passed by Oscar in a blur, and finally Isaac and Raj cornered him in the cafeteria. "Look, if you're possessed, we'll understand, okay?" Isaac said. "Just blink twice if you need help." "Come on, man. If you're trapped in there, let us help you," Raj said, nodding with Isaac. "I'm not possessed," Oscar said. But he couldn't make himself smile. "Dude, if this is still about the plush trap thing," Isaac said, and Oscar thought that was a funny way of referring to a misdemeanor. "It's not just that," Oscar said, and Raj and Isaac got quiet. Oscar figured they probably understood. They'd been friends long enough for them to notice that Oscar's shoes never had the right logo, that his backpack had to last 2 school years instead of 1. "First generation technology is always bogus anyway," Raj said. "We'll save up for Gen 2. I'll give them a chance to work out all the bugs." Isaac nodded, and Oscar actually did feel better. They didn't hate him. He was down a mom and a plush trap, but he was up 2 friends. Things were starting to even out. That's probably what made the thing he had to say next even harder. "I've got to take it back." Isaac put his palm to his forehead, and Raj just closed his eyes. Clearly, they'd seen this coming. "With those eyes and those teeth in it?" Raj said. "Come on, dude. Just let it go." "I can't. My mom knows." They both looked up. "How are you even alive?" asked Raj. "I mean, she didn't say she knows, but she knows," said Oscar. "What good will it even do?" asked Raj. "It's busted. Our money's already gone. And do you really want to answer questions about those, upgrades?" Raj and Isaac looked around to make sure no one had heard. Oscar understood. It was bad enough owning up to the theft. Raj was right. He absolutely did not want to answer any questions about the eerily human eyes and set of matching human teeth. Which is still impossible, Oscar told himself, even though he hadn't mustered the courage to touch the eyes for himself, and swore that last night those same eyes had followed him across the room. He shook off the memory. "That isn't the point," Oscar said, and Raj and Isaac couldn't say anything because they knew it was true. It wasn't about the money or the toy. It was about the taking, and Oscar wasn't a taker. None of them were. "You guys don't have to come," he said. "I was the one who did it." But Raj and Isaac just sighed and looked at their shoes, and Oscar knew he wouldn't be walking to the mall himself by that afternoon. His friends would be there with him. "You're an idiot," said Isaac. "I know." For some reason, the box felt heavier in Oscar's hands on the way back to the mall. Maybe it was because of all the money they'd sunk into it. "What if we see those security guards again?" Isaac asked, and they stopped just outside the doors to the east entrance. Raj shook his head. "What are they gonna do? Arrest us for returning what we stole?" "Good point," Isaac said, and they began to slow walk to the Emporium. But when they arrived, the Emporium was gone. "What?" Oscar whispered, as he read and reread the big orange letters lighting the place above the glass doors that used to be yellow. Now they spelled Hal's Halloween Hallway. "Did we come in the wrong entrance?" Raj asked, but they all knew they hadn't. Any doubts that remained were laid to rest the minute they walked through the door. The same stained and grimy floor spread the length of the store, but now, instead of shelves lined with dusty toys and dark spaces, every sort of Halloween accoutrement spilled from the metal racks. There was an aisle for decorations and lights, another for party favors, 2 for candy, and what looked to be 5 or 6 aisles crammed with every sort of costume, from murderous slashes to sparkly princesses. "Did we fall through a wormhole or something?" Isaac asked, scratching the back of his neck. "Hey guys, look!" Raj chuckled, pulling a green plush trap chaser costume from the rack and holding it against him. "Dude, seriously?" Isaac said, yanking the costume from Raj's hands and replacing it. Oscar made his way to the cashier's counter at the front of the store, the scene of humanity's meltdown not even a week ago. "Where's the Emporium?" asked Oscar in a daze. The girl behind the counter wore a pair of yellow antennae on long springs that bounced when she looked down from her perch at Oscar. "The what?" "The store that was here before," Oscar said. "Oh yeah," she said, without answering the question, nor apparently caring to. "Where'd it go?" Oscar asked. "Not a clue," the girl said, returning to the screen on her phone. "I just filled out an application and poof," she said, waving a hand lazily. "Here I am." "But I need to return this," said Oscar, suddenly feeling very young and small next to this older girl. The girl looked back down at him, and her eyes widened just enough to know he'd finally gotten her attention. It lasted only a second, though. "Is that what I think it is?" she asked, looking at his screen again. "Why would you want to return it? You could sell that thing for a fortune." It's not mine," Oscar said, looking down. When he looked back up, the girl had lifted the eyebrow closest to him. "It is now." Oscar looked back down at the box in his hands, the cardboard looking more crinkled than ever. When he rejoined Raj and Isaac, they were decked out fully in hockey masks and pixie wings. "I'm going for a kind of murderous fairy vibe," said Raj. "I can't return it," Oscar said, and Isaac and Raj lifted their masks. "Well, no one can say we didn't try, right?" Raj said. "Maybe it's for the best," said Isaac, but he didn't follow it up with anything, so Oscar knew he couldn't think of a reason why. 10 minutes and 3 sets of pixie wings and husky masks later, the boys headed back to Oscar's house to devise a plan for trick-or-treating. Every year, they vowed to make it to the other side of the train tracks where the good candy was rumored to be. Every year, they ran out of time, distracted by the false promise of the good stuff closer by. "We fall for it every time," Raj said. "Not this year. This year, we start on the other side of the tracks and work our way back." Oscar and Isaac agreed. It was a good plan. The plan set, Raj and Isaac fell deep into a match to the death on Raj's newest console game, taking turns after wiping palm sweat from the controls before each turn. "You're going down," Raj said, but his thumbs jammed furiously at the buttons while Isaac sat back smiling. "Every time," Isaac said. "You say it every time. One day, you're just going to have to admit you're not the champion," Raj said, beads of sweat forming on his brow. Oscar was barely paying attention, though. He was trifling away the remaining battery leakage from the compartment on the back of the plush-trap chaser. The wind was picking up outside, and it looked like the storm the news had been blathering on about for the last week was finally going to hit. The electricity kept flickering on and off, which was only contributing more to Raj's losing streak. "Come on, it doesn't count if the power goes out," Raj complained. "I don't make the rules," Isaac said, smug in his luck. It had to make Raj even angrier that the game was his. So was the console. He should be better at it, except that they mostly kept it plugged in at Oscar's because he was the only one without siblings hanging around begging to play. Oscar wasn't interested in video games right then, though. "Oscar, help me out here. Power outages weren't a redo, don't they?" Raj asked while they waited for the power to come back on. The light outside was fading fast. Oscar asked. He'd tried scraping away the rest of the gunk, swapping out the battery for one in the little fan that sat on his mom's bedside table, even turning the battery around to face the opposite charge, hoping maybe it was a manufacturing defect. Nothing powered the plush trap chaser, though. "Why are you still messing with that?" Isaac asked, clearly tired of the drama it had brought for the last several days. He's right, Raj said, in a rare moment of agreement. It's hopeless, Oscar. Just let it go. I think we should literally let it go, Isaac said, as in get rid of it. He twisted his mouth for a second. It's not just broken. It's, I don't know, just wrong. Oscar didn't agree, but he wasn't going to admit it. He ignored Isaac, and he ignored Raj too. But Oscar didn't feel like he was hopeless. They'd gotten away from more security. He'd kept the truth from his mom. They tried to do the right thing and return it. It was like there was some reason he had to keep this thing. He flipped it over and stared into the murky, glistening green eyes of the ugly rabbit. If you're possessed, blink twice, he said to the bunny, chuckling quietly. Yet while the plush trap didn't blink, it emitted a sound. A sort of quiet chirp, so fast it might not have happened at all. Did you guys hear that? Hear what? Asked Raj. The power flickered back on, and the video game resumed, along with Raj and Isaac's arguing as they continued their tournament to the death. Then, just as Oscar was getting ready to flip the rabbit over again and take his 1000th look at the battery compartment, he spotted a tiny hole at the side of the rabbit's metal jaw. At first, it looked like nothing but a bolt holding together the hinge of the lower jaw. From this angle, though, Oscar could see that it wasn't a bolt at all. It was a port. Oscar's house phone began to ring as the lights flickered again. With the plush trap still in his hands, Oscar ran to the kitchen to catch the call before the machine picked up. Even if they could afford 2 phone plans, Oscar's mom would have insisted on keeping a landline. She was big on backup systems. The line was crackly, and it took Oscar asking 3 times who it was before he could clearly hear his mom's voice. Ugh, the storm, his mom said. How about now? Yeah, I can hear you, Oscar said, barely listening. He was trying to get a closer look at the port on the plush trap, but it was hard when the light in the kitchen kept blinking out. LM, I need your help tomorrow, she said. Sure, Mom, he said, not listening. I'm sorry to ask. You know how much I hate asking. It's just that the storm tonight. We've had so many people call in sick. We're going to be completely backed up on laundry and charts tomorrow. And... Are you listening? Uh-huh, Oscar lied. But it suddenly dawned on him why she sounded so apologetic. Wait, no, Mom. No, not tomorrow. I knew you'd be upset, hon. But it's... Mom, tomorrow's Halloween, Oscar said, suddenly panicked at what he'd agreed to. Not that he'd have had much of a say in the matter either way. I realize that, but sweetie, aren't you and your friends a little old to be... No! Why do you always do that? Oscar said, taking it a little too far. But now it was too late. Do what? Oscar could barely hear his mom now. The storm was encroaching on the phone lines and rattling the house from the outside. Maybe it was the fact that she sounded so far away that made Oscar feel like he could say what he said next. You act like I'm older, like I should be just like you, like I should be just like Dad. You never let me be a kid. Dad died, and you expected me to just grow up. Oscar, I stole it, okay? I stole the stupid plush trap toy. Your little man stole it, Oscar said. And he knew it was cruel, but he was just so angry because it was happening again. Once again, he was missing out on what everyone else got to enjoy. The lights blinked off and on in the kitchen, and suddenly his mom was gone. Mom? But all that greeted him was silence, then the echo of his own breath, and finally, the rapid tone of the circuit's busy signal. Oscar walked slowly back to his room, just in time to watch Isaac put the finishing moves on Raj's fighter. All Oscar could do, though, was stare at the tiny port by the plush trap's jaw. The damage of what he might have just done to his mother was too much to contemplate all at once. "Raj, I need your cell phone charger," Oscar said. "What? Right now? I was just catching up," he said, pointing to the screen. "No, you weren't," Oscar said. "Listen to the man," Oscar said. "He speaks the truth." Oscar flinched at the reference to him as a man and followed Raj to the hallway, where he fished a knotted cord from a drawer and handed it to Oscar. Oscar knew it was a kindness of Raj not to ask what he'd need a phone charger for if he didn't have a phone, but Raj was still following Oscar's motions with interest. Back in Oscar's room, Isaac had Raj's fighter's HP down to 10%. Oscar took a small breath and held it, then brought the charger's A connector to the hole in Plushtrap's head. When the plug fit snugly in place, Oscar exhaled. "This is it, Raj. I'm putting you out of your misery in 3. The sound of Isaac's fighter powering up for his death move pulsed in Oscar's ears as he marched the Plushtrap and charger to the outlet across the room. 2, said Isaac, as the lights began to flicker overhead. "Just get over with it," Raj said miserably. "And you're dead." Oscar didn't remember plugging the adapter into the wall. He didn't remember the lights going out, or Isaac's fighter winning the golden belt. If he was pressed, he might not be able to remember his own name. All he knew for the moment was that the room was dark, and he was on the other side of it. "What the—" He could hear Isaac say. "Do you smell burning?" He could hear Raj say. Oh man, Oscar," Isaac said. "Oscar? Oscar!" said Raj. Oscar couldn't understand why they seemed so panicked. He could barely make out the outline of their heads in the moonlight that illuminated the room in flicks and whips while the tree branches outside waved under the storm. "Oscar, how many fingers am I holding up?" said Raj. "You're not holding up anything," Isaac said, and Raj shook his head. "Right, sorry." "I'm fine," Oscar said, not certain that was true, but he was getting weirded out with them acting so worried about him. "What's wrong with you guys?" Do you not remember soaring across the room?" Raj said, as they looked even more worried now. "Knock it off," Oscar dismissed, using the wall for support as he struggled to get to his feet. His head felt like it was stuck in a fish tank. "We're not messing with you," Isaac said, and a closer look at their faces told Oscar it was true. "1 minute you're plugging in the charger, the next minute you're airborne. I think it was lightning." Outside, the moon fought for space in the sky against the invading clouds. Inside, Oscar's vision blurred for a moment longer until he finally felt things come into focus. "Maybe we should call his mom," he heard Isaac say. No, don't call her," Oscar said, and they both looked worried again. "What if your brain shorted out or something?" Raj said. "I'd still be smarter than you," Oscar murmured. "He's fine," said Isaac. Oscar tried the light switch by the door. Dead. Isaac tried the remote for the television, but the screen stayed dark. Nothing. "Well, I guess that settles it," Raj said, heading for the living room where their sleeping bags were. "We have no choice but to get sick on scorching hot cheese knobs and knock out tomorrow night's plan." Raj and Isaac headed for the living room, but Oscar lagged behind in his room. Halloween. For a precious minute, he'd forgotten that he wouldn't be able to go trick-or-treating. As the clouds swept away from the moon, Oscar looked across the room and saw the blackened scorch line beginning at the outlet and traveling up the wall. "Great," Oscar muttered. something else to apologize for. He was already formulating his explanation to his mom when he saw a flicker of movement from the plush-trap chaser, still miraculously plugged into the fried outlet. "Was that you?" he said. But the ugly green rabbit merely stared back at him, the glow of moonlight making its buggy eyes seem to shimmer. Oscar closed his bedroom door so he wouldn't have to look at his series of mistakes. Just as the door clicked shut, Oscar swore beyond all reason that he heard Raj's voice from the other side of the door. "Lights out," it said, with the faintest trickle of giggle on the end of the sentence. Oscar flung the door open, his eyes moving straight to the plush trap. "What did you say?" "Huh?" asked Isaac, already down the hall on his way to the living room. "You heard that, right?" "Heard what?" Oscar turned back to his room. "Come on, Raj. It's not funny." "What's not funny?" Raj asked, poking his head around the corner at the other end of the hall. Oscar shook his head. "Nothing. Never mind." "Are you sure you're okay?" said Isaac, and Oscar conjured another laugh. "Stupid storms making me hear things." In the living room, Raj and Isaac had torn into 2 bags of chips and was slurping electric blue fruit punch at a record pace. Isaac belched. "Okay, so if we start here, just over the train tracks, we can work our way south," he said. They were studying Raj's glowing phone, opened to a map of the town that centered on the split by the rail line between the east and west side. It wasn't lost on Oscar that they lived on the wrong side of the tracks, a joke that was a little too on the nose to make even with his friends. "No, we need to start south and work our way north," said Raj. "But we'll waste all our time in transit," argued Isaac, punctuating his point with another loud burp. "Dude, I could smell that one," said Raj, scooting away. "And we'll move faster between houses if we're not already weighted down by candy. It's all about aerodynamics," he said. Oscar had been watching the plan hatch from the kitchen while he quietly crumbled. The boys finally noticed him standing there. "Fine, Oscar can break the tie," Raj said. "Where do we start, Oscar? North or south end of the tracks?" "I can't go." Raj let his phone drop to the floor. He and Isaac exchanged a look, and Oscar tried hard not to believe they hadn't seen this coming. But Oscar was forever having to skip out on plans when his mom called on him. Her little man. "It's my mom," he said unnecessarily. "She needs—" He couldn't even bring himself to finish. Isaac said, putting on his best act. "It'll be lame anyway." Raj played along as usual. "I bet the full-size candy bars are just a myth." Isaac nodded. "And we'll split the stash 3 ways." Oscar knew they were lying about it being epic. He knew they'd divvy their haul with him. He knew they were disappointed, but he'd never felt more grateful for his friends. "Whoa, is that a white streak in your hair?" Isaac said, pointing at Oscar's head, pivoting the conversation. Oscar reached for his head. "Seriously?" Isaac chuckled. "No, but I'm sure you fried a few brain cells back there." Raj cackled. "Not that you could afford to lose any." For the first time that night, Oscar felt settled. Maybe everything would be okay. He didn't have a plush trap chaser or a cell phone or Halloween. He didn't have his dad, but he had a mom who needed him, and he had friends who had his back. Oscar had just taken his place beside Raj and Isaac on the living room floor when a spear of lightning tore through the sky. The light was so bright at first Oscar thought his vision had blinked out. But when the light didn't return, and only the shadows and shapes of his living room surrounded him, he realized the rest of the house's power must have gone out. I think maybe you did a little more damage than just shorting out the socket," Raj said through the dark. Oscar stood and felt his way to the window, which was harder to see than before because whatever moonlight that had made it through the storm earlier was gone now, covered by a thick layer of thunderheads. "Nah," he said, pressing his cheek to the glass. "The power's out everywhere. Lightning must have hit the grid." Isaac snorted. "Bet it's not out on these side. Ever wonder how theirs never seems to get hit?" "Hang on, I'll get some flashlights," Oscar said. "Mom bought a second one after the last time the power went out. That one lasted almost 2 days," Raj remembered. "We had to throw away half the food in our fridge." 2 days, with no TV, no games," Isaac said, shivering. "My phone lost charge by the middle of the first day," said Raj. The boys stared into their memories of the great power outage of May before shaking off the horror. Oscar handed Isaac the cheap, lightweight flashlight and kept the heavier one for himself. "Gonna have to use your phone flashlight," Oscar said to Raj. "We only have 2. "Sure, go ahead. Run my battery down," Raj pouted. Suddenly, the boys heard a thump coming from the other side of the house. Oscar might have been able to dismiss it as his imagination if Isaac and Raj hadn't reacted too. "Did you get a cat or something?" asked Isaac. Oscar shook his head, then remembered they couldn't see him. He flicked on his flashlight, and Isaac followed suit. Another thump echoed from the same place, and Oscar swallowed audibly. "Maybe a tree branch against the window?" Raj offered, but he didn't sound convinced. Isaac shook his head and charged forward. "This is stupid." "Hang on," Oscar said, but Isaac was already halfway down the hall. When they rounded the corner, another thump, this one decidedly louder, greeted them from behind Oscar's closed bedroom door. The house was too dark to detect any sort of shadow from the crack under the door, but the source of the sound was unmistakable. Something was banging slowly against the door in Oscar's room. "So it was a no on the cat then?" whispered Isaac, his voice shaking. "It's not a cat," Oscar hissed, and Raj shushed them. As though in response to their voices, the banging stopped, and the boys held one collective breath. Then, all at once, the banging started again, this time twice as fast, and with so much force it shook the door. The boys slowly backed away, but didn't dare take their eyes off the door. "Still think it's a tree branch?" Isaac shot at Raj. "Not unless the tree climbed into my room," said Oscar. "You guys, shut up!" said Raj, holding up his hand. "Do you hear that?" "What is that?" Oscar whispered. "It sounds like scraping," said Isaac. They didn't have to wait long to find out. There, underneath the doorknob, a jagged hole in the plywood began to emerge, dug by a row of persistent human-looking teeth, strong enough to bite through a butter knife. As they dug, the teeth seemed to change shape, sharpening as they worked. "No way," Oscar breathed. "I thought it was broken," yelled Raj, almost accusingly. "It was," said Oscar. "Can we please argue about this somewhere else?" said Isaac, watching the quick progress the saw-like teeth were making on the area around the doorknob. "Dude, it's a toy," said Raj. "What do you think it's gonna—" Then, with 2 more powerful bangs against the door, the bronze knob fell from Oscar's bedroom door, and it swung open to reveal a 3-foot shadow with long, crooked ears. And while the plush trap was a mere shadow, its gleaming, jagged teeth shone even in the dark. And was that blood around the edges of the front teeth? How was that possible? Unless the teeth were human, and the gums were human too. But then, would they still bleed? It was all impossible. So impossible, he couldn't bring himself to say any of it out loud. Then, All at once, the plush-trap chaser ran straight for Oscar, Raj, and Isaac. "Go, go, go!" Raj screamed, and they sprinted down the hallway. Oscar heard a small clunk and nearly tripped over whatever it was. "In here!" The boys darted to the next closest room, Oscar's mom's, and slammed the door behind them. Raj shoved the others aside to lock it. "Really? You think it could turn knobs?" said Isaac, trying to catch his breath. "I don't know what the heck it can do!" yelled Raj. Then the banging began, this time on the door closest to them, and the boys stepped away in unison, watching the door bow under the force of a 3-foot bunny. Oscar's eyes widened as he heard the telltale sounds of scraping. The plush trap was about to chew through this door too. "How do we stop this thing?" said Isaac. "The switch is under its foot, right?" They continued to back away as the scraping grew faster, the rabbit's skills appearing to improve with practice. Oscar looked around the room frantically. "Well, we better think of something quick, or that thing is gonna eat through this door too, and I don't think we can all fit in the bathroom," said Raj. And Isaac shined his flashlight at the hole beginning to form by the doorknob. "Quick! Climb up on something! The highest thing you can!" said Oscar, and they each found a surface. Oscar on the vanity, Isaac on the dresser, and Raj perched precariously on top of the headboard. In no time, the rabbit had chewed through this door too, and with a loud thunk, the doorknob fell to the carpet. Slowly, the door creaked open to once again reveal the vacant stare and crooked ears of the green rabbit. The boys held their breath and waited to see what the plush trap would do. It took a very little time for the bunny to make up its mind. A machine bent on its one job. It headed straight for the object in front of it, the dresser, and began to drag its jagged teeth across the wood of the wardrobe's legs. "Are you kidding me?" screamed Isaac, watching in horror as the bunny made fast work of one of the dresser's ornate legs. In another minute, the leg would be reduced to the width of a toothpick, and Isaac would topple to the floor right in front of this ruthless rabbit. "Think of something!" pleaded Isaac. "Somebody think of something fast! How else do we turn it off? How do we turn it off?" Oscar asked no one in particular, but little piles of sawdust were forming at the base of the dresser, and Isaac was already starting to slide. "The light!" Raj yelled from the headboard, momentarily losing his grip on the ledge and catching himself. "The box said it freezes under light." "My flashlight's in the hallway!" screamed Isaac, sliding inches closer to the rabbit. It took Oscar far too long to remember he was holding the other flashlight. "Oscar, now!" Raj hollered, and Oscar regained his senses and flipped the beam on the plush trap chaser. But it didn't work. "Get in front of it!" screamed Isaac, and Oscar scooted to the edge of the vanity and stretched his arms as far as he could so the beam of light shone directly into the bunny's eyes. Suddenly, the toy froze mid-gnaw as it opened wide for the last chomp on the dresser leg. The room grew quiet as the boys gasped for breath, the beam on the bunny shaking under Oscar's trembling grip. "Keep it steady," Isaac whispered, as though afraid he could wake the beast by sound. "I am trying," hissed Oscar. The dresser was swaying under Isaac, trying to figure out how to stand on 3.5 legs, and it wasn't going to hold Isaac for much longer, with or without Plushtrap chewing away at it. "I've got to get down," said Isaac, more to himself than to his friends, but they understood. He was trying to gather the courage. "It can't move as long as Oscar keeps the light on it," said Raj, sensing Isaac's distrust of the momentary armistice. "Easy for you to say," said Isaac, never taking his eyes off the green thing at the base of the wardrobe. You're not inches from a freaking wood chipper. And what the heck is up with his teeth? They're not supposed to look like that. I think it's safe to say there's a whole lot about this situation that isn't supposed to be like that, said Raj. Now would you get off the stupid dresser? He's right, Oscar encouraged. As long as there's light, it's not supposed to be able to move. It wasn't supposed to be able to move anyway, remember? Said Isaac. How did it suddenly come to life? Neither Raj nor Isaac had a good answer to offer, especially not in that moment. Maybe the lightning? Something about when it was plugged into that socket? I don't know. What I do know is that the dresser is about a second from collapsing, said Oscar. Isaac nodded, accepting his fate. He was going to have to venture down to the floor. Sliding himself as far away as possible from the open mouth of the plush trap, Isaac draped one leg over the side of the dresser, then snatched it back, throwing his balance off. Man, come on, said Raj, the suspense killing him. Hey, you pick which limb you'd rather have torn off, growled Isaac. And Oscar tried a different approach. Quick and easy, just like a bandage, he suggested. And Isaac seemed to like that approach better. Quick and easy, Isaac repeated, just as Isaac prepared to slide down the dresser from the far corner of the room, a corner where no one stood. A voice called out, Guys, over here! Not just any voice, though. Raj's voice. Oscar didn't mean to move the light to the corner. It was instinct. Whoa, 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 put it back! Put it back! Oscar juggled the flashlight in his hands and swept the beam back to the plush trap's gaze, just as its teeth prepared to close on Isaac's sliding leg. Cute trick, Raj. Think maybe you could practice your ventriloquist act some other time? Said Oscar, struggling to regain his breath. But Raj simply stared, wide-eyed, into the corner. It wasn't you, was it? Said Isaac, holding his nearly sacrificed leg. Oh, come on, seriously? Said Oscar. It can mimic voices? Our voices, said Raj, gulping, to distract us. The damaged wood under Isaac groaned, and he slid to the ground and ran faster than Oscar had ever seen him move. Then he skittered across the floor and joined Oscar on the vanity. Now what? Asked Raj, and Oscar was ready with an answer. We'll leave the flashlight right here, right on it, he said. We barricade the door and call for help. Isaac and Raj thought it over for a second, then silently agreed. Raj moved first, inching his way off the headboard and backing toward the door, never taking his eyes from the demented bunny, which, under the glow of Oscar's flashlight, had taken on a sickly green hue amid the surrounding shadows of the room. Then, just as Oscar and Isaac began to lower themselves to the carpet too, the beam from the flashlight began to falter, flickering on and off in split-second intervals. Panicked, Oscar slapped the side of the light and brought the beam back to life, but only for a second, when it once again failed and reappeared. Oscar, said Isaac in a low voice, is there any chance at all that wasn't the battery on your flashlight dying? The beam blinked out and reappeared again, but it stayed extinguished long enough this time for them to hear the jaw of the plush trap shut. Oscar started, but he didn't have time to finish. When the beam flickered out this time, it stayed out. Run! Screamed Oscar, and he and Isaac clamored for the door, so close to Raj that they scraped his heels with their toes. They ran across the hall to the bathroom, and Isaac kicked his dropped flashlight ahead of them. They slammed the door, throwing their backs against it just in time to feel the force of 3 feet of metal and plush hit the other side. The rabbit wasted no time in running its cracked teeth across the wood, again tackling the area right around the doorknob. Isaac dropped to the ground and groped for his lost flashlight, juggling it between his hands before finding the switch and casting the beam toward the door. But they all knew it would only work on the bunny once it had chewed through the door. Once they were face to face with it. "Raj, where's your phone?" said Oscar. Raj held it up like a talisman, its screen glowing blue in the dark bathroom. "Save the light," said Oscar. "Just call for help." "Right," said Raj, catching on. He quickly dialed 911 and waited for the relief that would come in the form of the operator's voice. "What's taking so long?" said Isaac, eyeing the handle as it began to wiggle in its loosening support. "Nothing's happening," said Raj, trying again. "What do you mean? It's 911. Someone has to pick up," said Isaac. "I mean, the call's not even going through. Like, there's no service or anything." "I don't know," said Raj, growing desperate. Okay, said Oscar, trying to think it through. But the plush trap's teeth were starting to show through the door again. It was leaving tiny green threads on the splinters around the doorknob. "Here's what we're gonna do. I'm going to open the door." "Bad idea," Raj said, panic lacing his voice. "Horrible idea." "Wait," said Oscar, trying to keep his cool. "I'll open the door, and I'll hit it with a light to freeze it. You two get out while I'm shining the light on it, and go to the kitchen. You can call for help using the landline." "So you're saying we should just leave you alone with this thing?" said Isaac. "Unless you want to stay here with me," said Oscar. No, we'll go to the kitchen," Raj interjected quickly. "On my mark," said Oscar, absolutely not ready to call the mark, but it was happening one way or the other. The knob was about to drop. 3, 2, said Oscar, and he grabbed the doorknob before it lost its place in the door. "Go!" Oscar flung the door open. The plush trap chaser burst through and went stiff in the light. Its eyes were so muddy under the close beam of the flashlight that it was difficult to remember they used to be green. The featureless orbs were somehow more terrifying than normal live eyeballs. Its mouth hung open hungrily, the teeth even bloodier than they had been the last time Oscar had looked at them closely. Its jointed arms extended straight in front of it, ready to push through the door. Shallow breaths filled the tiny bathroom as Isaac and Raj jockeyed for space as far away from the plush trap as possible. But it was standing in the doorway. They'd have to squeeze past. Isaac sucked his stomach in, but the wiry hair of the rabbit still grabbed at his shirt. Raj winced and did the same, the top of the rabbit's arm brushing his ear as he scooted past and stood on shaking legs in the hallway with Isaac. "You're sure about this?" Raj asked Oscar. "Nope," Oscar said. "Just hurry." The boys scampered down the hall and yanked the receiver off the phone's cradle in the kitchen. But as Oscar stood eye to bulging eye with the plush trap, he could tell by the way his friends were arguing that they weren't getting through to 911 by the landline either. When they reappeared in the doorway, Raj was the one to deliver the bad news. The phone lines must be down. As there was confirmation, wind whipped against the house, rattling the space behind the walls where pipes snaked through insulation. "So to recap," said Oscar, his light carefully trained on the bunny. "We're trapped in my house with a mindless eating machine with exactly 1 working flashlight. 2, if you count my phone," Raj interrupted. "During a storm that's knocked out the power lines and the phone lines." "And the water," said Isaac, and the two boys waited for explanation. "I got thirsty. I tried the tap." "It can chew through almost anything, so," said Raj. "So what happens when our lights run out of batteries?" said Oscar. The boys all stared at the plush trap, as though it might provide an answer. It merely stared into the light Oscar didn't dare take away from its face. "Hey, Oscar," said Raj, and Oscar didn't like the tone of his voice. It was obvious some new horror had just occurred to him. "What? How are you going to get out of there?" "What do you mean? Same way you guys did." "Uh-huh," said Raj, shaking his head slowly. "We got out because you were shining the light on its face." "Yeah?" We're not facing it anymore. We're behind it. Oscar finally understood the light didn't just need to be on the rabbit. It needs to see it, he said, shuddering at the prospect of those horrible, dead human eyes seeing anything. Hang on, said Isaac. We can use the mirror. The boys tried to angle the plush trap toward the counter, while Oscar's hands made the beam tremble. Hold it steady, said Isaac. I'm trying. Do you know how hard it is to hold something level for this long? My arm is killing me. Would you two shut up? Said Raj, leaning hard against the plush trap. Isaac, help me with this thing. Dude, it's not that heavy. Raj stood away from the rabbit. You try. But Isaac couldn't make it budge either. It's like its gears are locked in place or something. They were quiet for another minute. Okay, here's what we're going to do, said Oscar. One of you is going to hold the flashlight over its head, between the ears. Not it, said Raj. I'll sneak past, and then we'll all make a run for it. Raj nodded. Yeah, that could work. As soon as it turns around, we just back away, keep the flashlight on it for as long as we can. Exactly. It'll buy us time to at least get down to the end of the hole. It was the best idea they could muster. And it might have worked if the smaller, cheaper flashlight hadn't begun to flicker in that exact moment. The great power outage of May had drained the batteries prematurely. No! No, said Oscar. Why do all your flashlights die? Accused Isaac. Shut up and hold it, said Oscar. And they were all beginning to panic. Isaac cringed as he held his arm between the scratchy fur of the rabbit's ears, angling to beam into its bulging eyes as Oscar flattened himself against the doorframe. Let me in. I'll use my phone light, Raj said breathlessly. Too late, said Isaac. No room to switch places. Then, just as Oscar was pinned beside the plush trap, they heard a voice from the front door. Little man, I need your help. Miss Avila, Isaac called over his shoulder. Stay there, don't move. But it was Isaac who moved, just a little as he turned, but enough to move the beam of his light. Isaac, the light! Oscar yelled. Sorry. Isaac refocused the light on the rabbit, but his arm shook and the beam began to falter, creating a deeply unsettling strobe effect. Now, the rabbit's head slowly turned in increments during the dark intervals between the flashlight's beam. When Oscar was nose to nose with the rabbit, the flashlight failed completely. Run! Screamed Oscar, and the others followed suit, shrieking in unison as the plush trap lived up to its name, chasing them in freakishly smooth mechanical strides down the narrow hallway of Oscar's house. Raj tried to aim his phone screen behind him, but the beam of light wasn't bright enough. The flashlight! Yelled Isaac, and Raj tried, but in his panic, the thin phone slipped right through his sweating hands. If there was any hope that the phone had survived its fall, the immediate crunch that came afterward extinguished that hope. The rabbit had stomped it. The garage! Oscar managed to gasp as they fled the biggest regret of his life. Throwing the door closed against the lunging rabbit, the boys listened in horror as it once again began to attack its obstacle with ruthless efficiency. This is the world's worst toy, Raj gasped. How did it know your mom's voice? Isaac wheezed. Who knows? Oscar said, throwing his hands in the air. Maybe it overheard her on the phone. He laughed hysterically. The possibilities are endless. Isaac clapped a hand over Oscar's shoulder. Snap out of it, man! You're losing it! Unlike the other rooms of the house, that had at least the benefit of shadows to see the space around them, the garage was pitch black, and as the boys groped for something they could use against the intruder, they managed only to knock tools off of shelves and trip over stored Christmas decorations. I suppose it's too much to ask if you have another flashlight in here somewhere, Isaac asked, his voice raspy with fear. Even if there was, I wouldn't know where to find it, said Oscar. Raj slapped at the garage door button frantically, but with the power out, it was no use. "Don't these things have an emergency release?" he asked, logic finally prevailing. Fur and teeth were beginning to emerge through the chewed hole in the door to the garage. "There's a lever," said Oscar, groping toward where he thought the middle of the garage might be. "It should be somewhere right." He began jumping, stretching his hands high overhead as he swiped at the air, searching for the knob tied to the rope that released the emergency lock on the garage. Raj joined him in the hunt, taking a different place in the garage. "Guys," Isaac said, and his voice was unsettlingly calm. "Hang on, I think my finger just hit it," said Oscar. "Guys," said Isaac again. "Where?" said Raj. "Over here." "Where's here?" "Here!" "Guys," said Isaac, and this time they both paused to listen. The sound of scraping began to grow louder as the plush trap made quick work of the thicker wood of the garage door. "What?" they answered in unison. "Where are we gonna go after this?" Oscar understood at some primal level why Isaac sounded so defeated. With no light anywhere to be found, all they could do was run. "So what? We just hang out and get ground up into a hamburger?" said Raj, resuming jumping. Oscar's terror reached a new level when Isaac didn't have an answer. And to think, less than an hour ago, their most vexing question had been about which end of the train tracks to start that trick-or-treating on. "The train!" yelled Oscar, and just as he did, he heard Raj's hand connect with the wooden knob and string attached to the garage's emergency release. The knob slapped the metal of the garage door. Raj jumped again, and again he stared at the knob swinging. "There it is!" "You guys!" Isaac yelled, urgency finding him once more, and they watched wide-eyed as the doorknob in the door began to wobble. "He's almost," said Isaac. "I'm almost," said Raj. Isaac's voice laughed from the other side of the door. "This is it. I'm putting you out of your misery in 3, 2, and you're dead." Raj's fingertips caught the wooden knob, and this time he yanked hard on the string, releasing the automatic arm holding the garage door in place. "Get on that side," said Oscar, and Isaac grabbed the ridge of the garage door on one end, while Raj took the middle and Oscar took the left. They flung the garage door up with enough force to make it hit the top of its track and come crashing back down. Just as it did, the handle from the door leading to the garage dropped to the concrete floor, and the door swung wide to reveal the plush-trap chaser, set on its mindless destruction. The boys threw the garage door open.
Nice animations were added to explain the difference between natural scrolling and traditional scrolling, or two-finger scrolling or edge scrolling on a touchpad. You also finally get the option to disable mouse pointer acceleration. Again, something a lot of people have been asking for, and now you can do it. Although it is named Pointer Assistance, and they had to implement a small clickable tooltip to explain what it is.